Hi there, it's Carol Morrock at carolmorrock.com. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Solo and Smart. And today's guest is Marianne Kilkenny, and she is the creator and founder of Women for Living in Community. And Marianne works each day to fulfill her dream, a world where people can age in grace, dignity, and peace, surrounded by family, friends, and community. And she is also the author of Your Quest for Home, which is a guidebook to find the ideal community for your later years. Well, welcome, Marianne. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Carol. Thank you for asking me. This is exciting.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I've heard so much about you, and my friend who is, I think, a member in your community, she is also one of my admins for our Facebook group. And
Right.
she had encouraged me to invite you on this YouTube channel several months ago. And I'm sorry, I'm just getting around to it. But anyway, welcome. So tell me, I know that you made a move, right, to Asheville, North Carolina. How did that work for you?
Well, that was, believe it or not, almost 16 years ago. And I moved from Silicon Valley, where I was in corporate human resources, and I made it out alive. So I figured I better get out while the going was good. My parents had both died, and there was a certain amount of it must be time for me to leave here. And so the move was, as many things, you know, I don't know how it happened, but it was this and that. And I loaded things up. There was a guy involved at the time. And, you know, I said, you know, I watched my parents age and go to the nursing home that they never wanted to go to, you know, and I realized, I don't want to have that happen to me. I don't want to go to one of those places. So I kept saying that. And it was that part of, okay, and what are you going to do to make sure that you have an alternative? And so when I moved to Asheville, I jumped in with both feet to start groups and meetings and people getting together around how can we age in a different way than the model that our parents had. So thus that my website, I made Women for Living in Community because women as advocates for relationships and connections, because I didn't know any other way to do it other than I am one. I am a woman, I am aging, and I also happen to be single, divorced, and with no children. That is now, the phrase has now been coined by Carol, which is a solo ager. I am one. So that's sort of my long answer to how I got to Asheville, and that's just the start of the journey.
Well, I appreciate you giving me kudos for coining that term, but it was not me. It's another person. That's okay. Her name is Sarah Geber, and her book is I think, Essentials for Retirement Planning as a Solo Ager. I may have that incorrect, but it's pretty close to that, the name of her book. And but I appreciate you calling out that term, because I prefer solo ager, of course, as opposed to most aging alone, for example. I don't care for that term aging, even though we are, but still don't like it. But I'm curious about, how did you get from, is it Silicon Valley to Asheville, North Carolina? What was that process like for you? Because I know many people in my group, you know, talk about making a move. I made one, however, well, I did. I made one from California, like you did, to help to Texas, to help my parents. But I didn't go alone. I mean, I went alone, but my parents were at the other end of that trip.
Yeah. Well, it's a timing thing, which I think is very important part about this. You know, it was timing and intention. So there was no longer a need for me to be in California. You know, I have family there, but the main reason that I was there was aging parents and a very high paying job. Okay, so one of those is gone. The other one, I'm like still having stress things from. So actually, it was a guy that I met who was from here. His children were here, his parents were here, and he was in the retirement business, you know, the continuing care retirement communities. So when we moved here, it was an interesting, I mean, synchronistic kind of thing. And I was reading a book that I am a big fan of. It's a fictional book, and it's The Ladies of Covington. And it's a 9-book series. It just so happened that I was reading the book, and it's about three women that, easy for me, the 3 women who live in a house together in a town that looks very much like a town near Asheville, North Carolina, where I now live. So there was enough of those things. And I was ready. I was so ready to leave Silicon Valley. You know, that chapter had closed. I just didn't know what to do next. And because I'd say to people, you know, and they say, well, you know, what are you going to do? And da, 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 now your parents are gone. And I said, I want to live like the Golden Girls. And people would say, really? Me too.
Nice.
So many people said that to me that I thought, I got something here, you know, I really do. So so I came with a gentleman, you know, we moved here, and from there, the funniest thing was we had a meeting when we first got here, and it was another one of those things that was at Ollie, which is now Ollie. And it was called Intentional Communities for the Second Half of Life.
Okay.
And one of the speakers, it wasn't us, said, we were here 3 weeks. And one of the speakers said, Marianne and whomever his name said, they're going to start one of these here in Asheville. And I'll never forget the sound of, it was like elephants coming. People like ran over to us, and because they were so interested in the idea and the concept, and that someone was actually going to do it. Because here was all this theory and all these speakers, like often is the case. And we were actually saying we were going to do something. And that is where many groups and meetings and, you know, communities coming together and talking about things started. And you know, I still have many friends from the many seminars that I attended about cohousing, about pocket neighborhoods, about, you know, how do you make decisions in community? What is consensus? What is sociocracy? I could go on, but you probably want to ask something else.
Well, I'm curious to hear about where you live now. You say you live like the Golden Girls. Do you have a home with housemates?
I do. Mm-hmm.
And can you tell me about that?
Sure. Well, in all of the work that I've done and reading and coaching, and I mean, I was the experiment. I was the one that was willing to take the risks to say, you know, at one point when I lived here for 4 years, I lived with 4 other adults over 55, married couple, 2 women. Because I kept saying I want to live like the Golden Girls, and it just so happened that I said that enough that ABC News came to our house and filmed us in 2011. I realized that was 10 years ago. My God.
Crazy.
So I really felt like I'd made it, you know, that I was being acknowledged for living like that. And now I've gone through a number of iterations since that experience. Here in Asheville, which was a fabulous, wonderful experience. Who would have ever known, to tell you the truth? And Then I lived on my own, but I knew all my neighbors. And then I bought this house and had it remodeled so that there's a separate suite for the other person from me. It actually was supposed to be, I would live in the handicapped accessible universal design part of the house, which was small, and that's my plan. And then I reversed it. My housemate lives in that part, I live in the other part of the house, and that we could have another housemate as well. But this thing the last couple of years made it a little bit uncomfortable for us to all get together. So it's a container of the household that makes a viable possibility for it. And when people say, oh, you don't live in community anymore, I'm like, well, I do. I live with somebody else. I know my neighbors, and I say I could define this as an organic, intentional community. I know all my neighbors.
Okay, I want to talk about the neighbor part because it's very significant for us as solo agers. But I first want to talk about or address some of the concerns you might have had when you were selecting a housemate, or even thinking through, say, the legal issues about, having someone move into your home, because it's your home, right? Your home.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So
yeah.
How did you think that through? Did you go to an attorney?
I did not. I do have 30 years in human resources, which makes me either amazingly afraid of lawyers or, and I think I hired people for a living. So that was one of the things when we did interviews with our housemates, because we had a few when we were in the house where there were 5 of us, and I was there the longest. And people would say, I used to interview for a living. So I sometimes had to say, pardon me if this is too much, but I used to do this for a living. So don't be offended if I ask you probing questions. So I front-ended it to make sure that they didn't feel, that they were being grilled. And that said, I had a really significant plan on what do I ask people, and that's only got to be more and more. It got longer. And one of the things I said, never, ever have a housemate that you only meet once, ever. Also, we at that point, we had a lease, and in that house, in that situation, it was what I would consider one of the most ideal situations, because none of the people who owned the house lived in it. The owners of the house lived somewhere else. So the dynamics was a little bit better than the owner of the house living in it. So I have a lease, and I, with the person that lives with me, I know her, I knew her, I lived with her before. And so in that situation, it was, and I think it's important to, I don't care who they are, I don't care if they're your best friend. And this is something I recommend: have a written agreement, have a lease. I also love something called the blueprint of we, and that is something that I have used with everybody I work with. And it's pretty much, it's what do I look like on a good day or a bad day? It's significant, and it says so that when things happen, because things will happen, in any relationship, whether you live with the person or not, what's going to happen? How are we going to handle this? What are we going to do? And there's all these things that are set up in place, and it gives you a lot of information. So that's one of the things I also talk about when we interview with people. When I interview people is, we are going to get together. Are we going to eat together? Simple things like that, to say, how much merge time do you want? How much alone time do you want? Do you want to be, if somebody says, for instance, I want to do everything with you, I'm like, that might not be the right person.
Right, exactly. I think that's great. So do you have some of these considerations in your book?
Yes, I do. I do.
Oh, good.
And in the resource section, I have some of the things that tell you about the blueprint of we. Of course, I also have a website that has all those resources. And yeah.
Okay. Okay. And at the end of this video, of course, we'll have you lift that book up and then tell people what your website is. Definitely.
Sure.
Because I
Sure.
think it's important for all of us to have a resource like this. Because there's so many of us who want to potentially, not necessarily actually follow through, but potentially live in a situation that you're living in. I think it's a great option for us, especially as prices go up, right?
Right. And I have to say that the thing that I really say in my workshops and things like that is it's really, really important. There's 3 aspects. It's who the people are, what the place is like, and what the personal tools are that we have. Now, what does that mean? That means, what kind of communication styles do I have? What's my flexibility? How much flexibility do I have? Things like that. And I really think it takes someone who knows themselves, who has done what I would call my California, actually interpersonal work. Because if you've ever been married before, it's a lot of work to be in a relationship, and this is not any different. The only difference is some of the other attributes that you have, the things that come along with being married. So it's very similar.
Okay, well, that's a good point. Yeah, so we'll have Marianne hold up her book in a minute. Now let's talk about getting to know neighbors, because I think that's a significant part of building support right where we live.
Mhm.
And because I had lived, I don't know where you live is if it's in the suburbs, but when I lived in the suburbs, I felt terribly isolated. Of course, I lived alone. But I knew that if my neighbors, because I, at the time, did not know them all that well, or they were young and they were young families, they were gone to work and things like that. They were busy. And I often thought, well, if they didn't see me in a week, would they even notice? That was my concern. So I eventually now live in a high rise, which it just really fits my my lifestyle, or my preferences, I should say. And however, when I first moved here, it took about 2 years to build friendships and to build kind of familiarity with my neighbors. So, and I'm here now for 5 years, and we all know each other. And it's really great because I feel so connected. I mean, I feel rarely, I should say I never feel alone. Sometimes I wish they stopped calling me, but no, I'm kidding. I'm teasing, but anyway, so let's talk about building, getting to know our neighbors, because a lot of people are either afraid to do that, or they don't trust their neighbors, or feel like they might get scammed, or fall into some sort of, odd kind of a relationship, if that makes sense.
Which is sad that we are in a state that we feel that way. I mean, I grew up near Chicago in a neighborhood, on a college campus, where when my mom was still at school teaching, I ran to the neighbor's house, and that was how I grew up. So it's not I didn't realize that this is sort of inbred in me to live like this, so, and I think probably there's got to be a desire to get to know your neighbors. I wouldn't say, if your neighbor has things that scare you, I don't think I would approach that person. But at the same time, depending on what your neighborhood is like, one of the things that, you could go for a walk. And that kills more than one bird with that. And that is, you get exercise. And at that point, you're out and about and you're in front of people and you can ascertain, what does this look like? Is this safe? Someone, for instance, somebody they're working in the garage, wave, hi, and see what happens. What's the reaction? And if it's like somebody approaches and you say, hi, my name is Marianne, I live over here. Again, taking that first step is what it is. And then, of course, people I've noticed in my neighborhood, people with dogs know every person in the neighborhood because they have to walk their dog. A lot of times they only know the dog. They don't know the owner of the dog, but you know what I mean. So I think walking, getting to know your neighbors like that, because taking those steps to say, hi. I mean, what an example of when I lived in that residential neighborhood and there were 5 adults in this big house. It was, the neighbors were like, who are all those people and what are they doing there? So what we did is we actually started having a monthly gathering and inviting the neighbors so they wouldn't think that we had 2 heads or that we were doing lewd things in the house. So, and as it turned out, we found out that some of those people had lived there for 20 years and had never met each other. Wow. And so we continued doing it and we said, hey, how about somebody else doing it at their house? Nope. Everybody thought we did a really, really good job. So you just continue doing it. But that was some way that we were able to reach out. And one of the things that's about that is tip, don't put the invitations in a mailbox. That's a federal offense. That's a free tip from me. Don't do that. The mail person said, excuse me, you can't do that. So we walked around the neighborhood and put various and sundry places, which was really good because we got out, got some exercise. And the other thing was we were really having an intention about, we want to get to know these people and we want them to get to know us. It got to the point though, that we had to put an ending time on the party because nobody wanted to leave. We were flicking the lights and the whole thing. The other thing I think is a really good idea is as you get to know your neighbors or to get to know your neighbors, for instance, offering, saying, hey, something is going on with the plumbing in my house. If you see somebody out and say, might you have a plumber that because I don't have anybody right now, and returning that favor, because I think everybody would love to know, the electrician, the plumber, the service people. And that's how oftentimes people realize, I was at a meeting one time, and these people realized that they had a naturally occurring retirement community, which the acronym is NORC. We were talking about, people and they're aging in one place and, they all use the same cleaning person and the same this and that. And there was this fervor in the back of the room. And they said, there was all these people realizing that they lived in a NORC, that it had just grown up. They had aged in place and they were using a lot of the same services. So it was great. It was great to see that. The last thing I'm thinking is a really good thing, which is something my sister does in California, which the weather's a little bit better there than it is here. And they have a block party on Friday afternoons. And, it's that consistency of we're going to be here. When the time changes, we'll move it an hour earlier. And everybody comes out. During COVID, it was great because everybody could sit far enough away. And they still do it, and people all bring foods. The other thing is food. Food brings people out. I don't care. When I was in corporate, if we had food, people showed up. It isn't any different in the world of neighborhoods, for sure.
You know, I was
So-
reading an article once doing research on pocket neighborhoods, which
Yeah.
I really appreciate. And it talked about dragging your picnic table from the backyard and put it out front and just go and sit or have a, you know, a cocktail or glass of tea or what have you, then neighbors will start coming out of the house. And because that's what happened to my parents. As a child, my mom and dad would drag 4 lawn chairs to the front every summer evening. And lo and behold, neighbors would come out of the house within 15 minutes and sit in one of the chairs and visit.
Right.
And I love that.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the kind of thing that we remember from our childhood.
yes.
And it doesn't cost anything. It isn't risky. You're in your own, you know, you didn't go over into anybody else's property or anything. You're just out there enjoying the sunset or the weather or whatever. I mean, I think that part of receiving
Yes.
is also a wonderful way because you haven't bothered anybody.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Well, Marianne, I'm sorry we're running out of time, but if you would show your book, please. There it is. Your Quest for Home by Marianne Kilkenny. And can you tell us your website, please, and how people can get in touch with you?
Sure. It's womenforlivingincommunity.com. And I do talks. I'll talk to anybody about this that'll listen to me pretty much. And I do classes. I'm going to do a class in January about how you, me, anybody can make this work, And so much of it is about, I mean, what I have done. People say, how did you get there? I'm like, remember all that years ago? I said, I want to live like the Golden Girls. So when it's shut, you know, I just keep saying it because a lot of people give up, and I'm kind of stubborn.
You know, I think that's true because that's what happens with me if I repeat something over and over again or just keep my eye on the ball of what I want. It usually manifests. I mean, it comes true. So
Sure.
yeah, thanks.
Right.
Thanks for that reminder. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for talking to us about building community right where we live. I appreciate your time. And thank you all for joining us today. Be sure to check out Marianne's book and website. I'll put the links below in the description of this video. And please share this video with a friend and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And thank you again.